If you don't know me by now, my name's Doug Burke. I'm from the Office of Equipment Management, ODOT, and I'll be doing a little follow-up. We talked back in Pennsylvania a few years back where we were just starting to get into the Perfect Truck program, and it was a kind of a top-down presentation or process that we were supposed to go through. What had happened, if you guys sat through our opening remarks from our director yesterday, he talked about going out and talking with our staffing levels, all of our crews, and he did the roundtable discussions, and he would call a chat with the director. Well, one of the things he came back with was there was a lot of concerns that we weren't necessarily getting the best product for our bidding processes, the best product that the operators wanted, that the options weren't always what they asked for, kind of the things that he related to his little topic he discussed. So he came back to us and he asked, what can we do to put a group together and help go out and talk to the districts, talk to the operators, talk to the highway techs, and see what is really the perfect truck that's out there. So our office went through and traveled out to all the districts. We'd been doing this over a few years, but this is one we hit really hard. We actually pulled counties in. We had representatives, a mechanical representative and an operator come into our location, and we sat down with them and we said, what do you like, what don't you like? Vehicle reliability came up. We had issues with, they don't understand the bidding process. They don't always understand what we're bound by. They just think that, hey, this is what we ought to have, so we can just go out and buy it, and they don't necessarily understand that. So us explaining it to them helped a lot, so at least they understood it. Not enough horsepower. I think when I started, we were 210 horsepower. Now every truck runs 300, about 315, and now we're pushing into like the 350 range with about 1150 torque. Next year they will still complain that there's not enough horsepower. I don't think we'll ever get to the top of that, let's put it that way. And then there were comments that they weren't given enough options to pick the truck that they felt was right for their environment. We have a little different, well, I don't want to say it's a little different, but in Ohio, we have a northeast corner that gets 200 plus inches of snow. We have a south corner that gets all ice. And then we have a west side that drifts. So there's different environments in our states that require different types of snowplow and different snowplow techniques. So we went out, we met with the manufacturers to come up with specifications. We went out for a multiple award bid that year. That way we were able to bring all the vendors in, get something that they could all agree on, and the goal was for us to go out and buy 12 of each truck and put a test out. The vendors that came to the table that year were Freightliner International, Mack, and Western Star. We had Peterbilt and we had Volvo in, but there were some issues with their spec that we would not relent on. A lot of it was floor-mounted pedals. We mandate hanging pedals. Tilting, one of them actually could not do a tilting hood with a stationary radiator grill. So those are the things that kicked them out. They're working on that to help get in. So we went out for bid. We also looked at the options of 300, 350s, 360s, and all the way up into a 430 horse. And the issues we had with that is as long as we stayed at that 1250 torque or below, we could stay in a 3000 RDS. But when we went above that, we went into a 4000. That 4000 RDS kicked us up $15,000 easily. So that was a concern that when we're going into this budget and what we could do, what options we really had the pricing to do. So we met with the employees. We reviewed the orders with them. We looked at their orders. One of the things that we did find out, or I guess our higher ups did find out, was it wasn't necessarily that we were saying no to these options. We found out the districts were saying no to their own counties. And it got back very clearly that we were taking whatever the order was and building it the way it suited. There was a disconnect somewhere down the line, and that has been worked on. So just a couple things. We had the 114s, the 4700 Western Star, the 7400 International, and the Granite. We also did opt in and try one of these the Freightliner 108s, which has a setback axle that we were always kind of dead set against because that plow hangs out so far forward. But we bought one as a sample. We ran it through as just a straight truck, and then we weighed it later. And we're comfortable with those weights as long as we're not adding front mounted wing plows or something else that adds a lot more weight to the system. Just a brief run through, you see some pricing that we looked at. Now this is 2015 money. That truck went through, all those trucks went through the process and now are out in the field being used. Some of them got some winter time last winter. Couple of things with the Freightliner. We specify a specific type of wiring system to the rear of the truck. It's a 7-pin multiplex, or a 7-pin MetroPack from WeatherPack. That was the biggest hurdle. The electrical on our specs is always the biggest hurdle because we require dropout plugs. It's much easier when it comes to the inmate installation if we have a plug to plug into than pulling the dash apart and wiring in and picking up everything. So that was always the biggest hurdle for us. The other thing was each vendor, as we got into it, has different levels of switch controls. Some are multiplex, some are not. Western Star prides themselves on everything being hardwire run, and there's absolutely no multiplexing in it. So that creates, when we come to wiring everything in after the fact, some issues that we have. So Freightliner, we found out the first spec had no storage pockets. That's in the spec now. This one thing when we wrote the spec to bring in all these other vendors is we learned what's missing in our spec. And it also requires frame extensions, which is something we've not dealt with. So we worked through all that. We looked at the 108s, it's about $1,000 cheaper. So when we're in the market of 160 trucks, that can be a substantial amount of money that we would save. All right. But we already expressed the concerns on that. The International's been our we've had that for years. That's what we've run for quite a bit. They did come in cheapest. The software issues we have those under control and we had those bought. The biggest thing that we were looking at on the International was their rollover into an SCR engine that we had not dealt with before. So that was a hurdle on their part, where everything goes and what kind of interference we were going to have into it. The Mac was all 12-volt switches, no multiplexing. So once they got over the hurdle of giving us the plug we asked for, there were no problems. One of the biggest things we saw in the Mac was the frames are narrower. So when we went to put an underbelly on, the underbelly spacing didn't fit and we had to put shims in. The other thing we found out later is it sits a little higher. So when we raise our single axle beds up in the air, we stay under 13'6". On a Mac, they go a little higher. So we have to take that into consideration because we have that limit when our beds go up. And then the last thing we found out is the cab's a little narrower. And we still have a few districts that like to run a manual transmission. When you take a manual transmission, you try to put a Force America control box all in there, and you have a cab that's narrower all the way around. It gets very tedious trying to get everything in, and sometimes questionable whether we can. But to date, it has been installed and it is out there. We'll see how the operators respond to it. And then lastly, the Western Star, as you said, they're the ones that said everything's hardwired, no multiplexing, nothing like that. So there wasn't really a lot of control issues once they got the wiring harness back to us. Again, the electrical is always what gave us grief. Everything else was pretty easy. So the issue is, how do you evaluate all these trucks? Is it the perfect truck? The comment came out lately as what? We should call it the right truck because there is no perfect truck. All right, we've seen issues with every one of them. Every one of them, one or two's been to the dealer, just like we had when we had Internationals. Some districts like them better than others, one truck over another, and that's an issue because if they really, really want a Western Star, they're really, really going to give it a good review. So we had issues of where do we put it? We had issues of how long is it going to take? I can tell you tomorrow that it's a piece of crap, but how do I know in 6 years if it's going to hold up for 8 years? You know, that takes time. How do we determine subjectively that it is, or objectively that it is a good piece of equipment? And what's a good way to actually rate it so that you rule out that favoritism? So a couple of things we're doing is we've sat down and we're starting to roll out questions that we can try to formulate that will go to the highway workers, to our operators, that will go to our mechanics, that will go to our TMs, and try to get some type of an opinion. It is going to be subjective, but hopefully we can come up with some ratings and some good questions that say, yes, what do you like, what don't you like, and get something back that formulates a good score based off of the usage and the operation and the repair time. We also were looking at the cost of operation and the cost of purchase. That plays into it big. And we're also looking at service. How well do they service? How fast do they service? How far do we have to take it to get service? Because there's some that are right around the corner, there's some that are 100 miles away, and we have to use a lowboy to get up to it every time. We're looking at a yearly evaluation where they'll go out and sit down and talk with everybody and try to get a good evaluation of those trucks every year, and then that comes back and goes into the scoring. But the length of time to evaluate, we're not sure yet. That's what we're still looking at. We're not sure how long it'll last. So that's what we're looking at. That's what we're trying to get together. It's going to take a little bit of a process. You saw the trucks, if you went back and looked, those are one of each of the trucks that we've rolled out. They will be going out through their storms, and hopefully in a few of these down the line, we'll be able to come back and say, here's some of the presentation on the results now we've seen for those trucks. Okay? Anybody questions?
Say, Doug,
Sorry.
The prices you had on there,
Yes.
is that just a chassis?
That was chassis only. Yeah, because depending on what options they add later, whether it's a live bottom bed, stationary bed, what kind of hydraulics, wings, it can inflate anywhere from to about 150 to almost 225, depending on the truck.
Why are the hanging pedals important?
If you run a loader, has anybody here had a loader for the salt barn that sticks when you push down on it because the hinges are on the bottom and your salt runs off of your foot? Binds up and then when you're running, you have to reach down and pull the loader pedal back up. We can't have that in a dump truck. When we the way we got on this was years ago when we got our first Sterling, the first one rolled off with a floor mounted pedal because our spec did not call for a hanging pedal because we always had gotten hanging pedals in the past. So when the first one rolled off, floor mounted, we're like, no. And we had that changed right there. We were kind of freaked us out a little. So that's why. So, anybody else? All right, thank you.